Yo.
What's good, everybody? It's One Too Many Reactions. We're back with some more rugby. We heard the feedback. Y'all want us to learn the rules for American football fans, so we did it. Yeah, he's got a lot on his chest for this.
Before we get started, raise your hand if Scotland absolutely got screwed over by the refs against England. Yeah, that's right. I'm watching Six Nations. I watched the first week, like the replays of it after we did a couple of reactions, and then I watched the stuff over the weekend. Not too pleased about how the game ended, dude.
Have you taken Scotland as your squad?
All right, so Italy is in there, and while I am not Italian. I do have family lineage that dates back to Italy. So I was, rooting for them, but I quickly abandoned them because they just got blown out by Ireland. So I was like, they're going to be useless in this thing. I can't invest the time. So I'm going with Scotland. Scotland's my team. Anybody but not France. Anybody but England, really. So
anybody but England.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. France, I'm not too crazy about, but there's something.
We might have some English fans, man.
Well, I mean, you can root against America. I don't care.
Yeah, I guess that's facts. You do root against America. Like, for real, we see the comments. All right, let's go.
Rugby explained for American football fans.
All right, to get things started, I want you to picture one of those wild plays at the end of some football games when there's no time left on the clock and the team with the ball needs to score a touchdown. So it's basically a mad scramble with a bunch of laterals and backward tosses with the hope that by doing this, they will eventually be able to break through the defense and score. You're watching some now, so it shouldn't be too hard to picture this. Now, imagine a game where every play is like this. So in our imaginary game, every play is this type of desperate, mad scramble. In this game, there are no forward passes.
Shit.
And in fact,
real quick. Yeah, somebody tell me if I'm right. Is this dude in the black shirt with the beard? Is this Antonio? I think his name is Yuli Antonio or something like that.
A game where every play is.
You know what's funny? I thought I recognized him from the other videos we
every
watched.
Play is this type of desperate, mad
It might not
scramble.
be, but
in this game, there are no forward passes.
It's not.
And in fact, a player on offense is not even allowed to.
It's not because that was New Zealand.
Yeah, the All Blacks.
Yeah, I was referencing to a player on France.
Fumble the ball forward or
I'm gonna be
forward accidentally. In this game that we're imagining, play doesn't stop when a player.
I made a mistake. South Africa was not happy with me saying New Zealand was number one. South Africa's apparently won the last 2 World Cups.
Yeah, I feel like it's
it's one of those things where it's like, oh, like the Red Sox are the best, and Yankees fans will be like, "Fuck you."
I think there's a few heavy hitters, and then they're
just gonna argue over who's the best. Yeah.
There is tackle. The player just gives the ball to a teammate and the scramble continues. In this game, in order to score a touchdown, you actually have to touch the ball down on the ground in the end zone. And finally, imagine that no one in this game is wearing helmets or pads or anything like that. If you can visualize what this imaginary game might be like, you are well on your way to understanding rugby. In fact, rugby and American football more or less descend from the same game, which explains their many similarities. We'll get to the history of all of this later in the video.
Quick disclaimer.
Before we go any further, I just want to say one thing. The purpose of this video is to explain rugby for an American football fan. As was the case with my Cricket Explained for Baseball Fans video, which I highly recommend, this video is intended as a basic starting point, and it comes from my perspective as an American-born sports fan. This being said, if you think I've left something out that's critical for a person to know if they want to understand rugby, or if you think that something needs to be better clarified, or if you think I've made an error, feel free to leave a comment. The comment sections under my videos have been overwhelmingly positive and helpful, and I ask that you keep it that way.
The 2 codes of rugby.
If you want to understand rugby, the first thing to know is that there are actually 2 distinct versions or codes of rugby. And these games are different enough from one another that they are usually considered to be 2 distinct sports. The older and more widely played version or code of rugby is officially called rugby union. And rugby union will be blue for the purposes of this video.
I'm a rugby
the
union
slightly
guy,
but only slightly newer code is called rugby league officially. And this is the dominant version of rugby in Australia, especially on the East Coast, in Northern England, and in certain Pacific Island nations, including Papua New Guinea, where it's the national sport. Rugby league will be yellow for this video. Each of these games generally goes by the simple name rugby, when it's being played. And sometimes they use the even more generic term football. So it's important to know which version of rugby you're watching, because again, they are different enough from one another that they are essentially different sports. Now, in the United States, the predominant form of rugby is rugby union. And this is the game that most people are referring to when they just say rugby. And again, this is also the case internationally for the most part. Rugby league is much less common in the United States. In fact, Wikipedia says that there are only about 700 registered players in the US. However, international rugby league matches are shown regularly in the US by at least one cable network, Fox Soccer Plus. So for some people in the United States, rugby league might be the only version of rugby that they have available to them on television. Because of this, and because I know this channel has an international following, and also because you might go to Australia and want to watch rugby and need to know what's going on, we're going to be covering both versions of rugby in this video. We will get to what makes each version of rugby unique later in the video. Let's begin with a general overview that applies to both games.
General overview.
Rugby, in general, is a contact sport played without pads or helmets, contested between two teams of either 13 or 15 players, depending on the version of rugby. There are 7-a-side and 9-a-side versions of rugby. These are shorter and faster-paced versions of the game that are often played at festivals.
Well, I was going to say, that's what you do at recess.
That is 100 meters long and at least 68 meters wide. So that's 109 yards long and at least 74 yards wide. The field has markings at various points, and the markings are different
How wide is
depending
an
on the
American
version of
football
rugby
field?
being played.
Oh.
These
Definitely
markings
not
do
that.
have
It's
some
like 20
significance
yards maybe,
within
right?
each game, but on the most
No. 20 yards.
You think it's too little?
Yeah.
You think 20? Do you think it's more than 20 yards?
Yeah.
25?
I would say,
It's a
don't know.
rectangle. Yeah.
well, it's a rectangle, but it's also 100 yards in length.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Do you think if I can... I'll say, I'm going to go with 35.
Is a football field. Sorry, guys.
What? Learning about rugby, like, how wide's a football?
Why isn't there... A football field is 120 yards long. Okay. Width of a football field in yards. 53.3. Wow. Okay.
Anyway, so Scotland, dude, he had the ball, and it was, you need to touch it down on the thing. Mm-hmm. It landed on the dude's cleat, but then he, brings it down. But it's, one of those, you need the video evidence or whatever, but,
Wait. If it hits if the dude gets his foot under the touchdown, it doesn't count?
No, it doesn't count.
You can, kick it up?
I believe the other team gets the ball. Yeah, if you get into the...
so you gotta try and get your foot underneath. Is that a thing that defenders try and do?
Well, I think just get up, not necessarily their foot, but just their bodies and stuff. But I don't know. I have some whatever. I won't get into it. A lot of questions about technique.
Yeah.
Of what whatever. Never mind. Another video.
Yeah.
Version of rugby being played. These markings do have some significance within each game, but on the most basic level, the markings on the field are your best clue as to whether you're watching rugby union or rugby league. Regardless of the version of rugby being played, the center line on the field is called a halfway line, and the goal lines are called the try lines. At each end of the field is an in-goal area, which is what we would call the end zone. The in-goal areas have a set of uprights that are called goals, and the out-of-bounds area is called touch. So where we would say the ball went out of bounds, they would say it went into touch, or that it's in touch. A rugby match begins similarly to an American football game. There is a coin toss to determine who kicks off, and the team that receives the kickoff attempts to move the ball down the field to score, while the team that kicked off tries to stop them. The team with possession of the oval-shaped ball is allowed to move it by running with it, kicking it, or tossing it laterally or backwards. Forward passes are not allowed, and an offensive team is not even permitted to play a ball that has been knocked or fumbled forward, even if the knock or the fumble was unintentional. You are allowed to punt the ball forward. The punt is often used to clear the ball
like
out,
a touchdown,
similar
like
to
a
the
pass.
purpose of the punt in American football.
Like a punt
but
pass.
Punt is also used offensively in rugby, which makes it the closest thing to the forward pass in American football.
That's fucking
Just like
sick.
in American football,
Did you see any
defenders
fire,
are allowed to make contact
boot
with
passes?
and
Like 50-yard boot passes?
I seen a bunch get a attempted. Like sometimes, a lot of times, defense gets him.
Yeah.
But my boy in Ireland, James Lowe,
You make a nice catch.
no, he just like he's nasty. Like from I don't know, I'm sure maybe other people have their opinions, but from what I'm seeing from
one game that I watched him play,
but he's like. A lot of the times, or not a lot, but there's like times where they'll just it's kind of becomes like a punting match where they're just trying to switch the field.
Yeah.
But he's got a boot and he's like puts it. There's a couple times where he put it in the damn it, I forget what they just said. In the try line, past the try line.
Yeah.
And just like has it like sit like right there. I'm like, dude, he's got a very smooth.
Oh, like a good punter.
James Lowe.
Tackle the ball carrier. Once the ball carrier has been brought to the ground, the tackling defender is required to release the tackle, and the ball carrier is required to give up the ball, which usually involves getting it to a teammate to continue play. The rules governing exactly what happens after a tackle has been made differ depending on which version of rugby is being played, and this is the biggest difference between the two codes of rugby. So we're going to be looking at this topic of what happens after a tackle in its own section later in the video. All right, let's talk about scoring. The objective in rugby is to score points, either by kicking the ball through the uprights, which is called a field goal, or by bringing the ball past the try line and touching it to the ground, which is called a try and is very similar to a touchdown. Just like the touchdown in American football, a try
Apparently they call it a try because back in the day, the only way you could kick a field goal is if you scored, and that wouldn't count as points. You would just like earn yourself a try at kicking a field goal, so they call it a try.
Worth more than a field goal. And after a team has scored a try, they get a free kick at the goalposts, which is called a conversion. A team can also score points via penalty kicks, which are uncontested kicks at the uprights that happen after penalties, similar to foul shots in basketball. The number of points earned by all of these things differs depending on which version of rugby you're watching. After points are scored, the team that got scored on kicks off to the team who just scored.
Oh,
so,
shit.
Yeah, they go hard. A rugby player is only allowed to make a play on the ball or influence the game if they are onside. During play, being onside generally means being behind the ball from your perspective. Being offside itself is not a penalty, but it becomes a penalty when an offside player attempts to make a play on the ball or interferes with the game. There are some more specific rules governing offside, including for some set pieces, and those are outside of the scope of this video. Let's talk about that ball real quick. The rugby ball is the same length as an American football.
Wait, so just so I'm clear, you have to be behind the ball carrier, or you can't do anything with the ball?
Yeah, so from what I understood, you need to, you can't receive the, you can't play the ball if you're on offense and you're beyond the ball carrier. You can it's not like a penalty per se, but you just can't play. Like you need.
So, but if I were to punt it forward, does that relinquish?
If you punt it forward, people can go.
So then it's not offsides anymore.
You need to be behind him when he punts, though.
Oh, so you can't to start from
yeah,
behind him. So it kind of is like being behind the line of scrimmage, like at the start of a play. Except he kicks it right. Okay, so it's harder to do pass plays. You need a really fast motherfucker.
Yeah, it's
to beat the ball there. Yeah.
The offsides rule is something that I'm like I was doing my own little. I was like just looking stuff up as I was watching some of the games because I'm like, dude, what the fuck? I don't think they do a good job the broadcast with like introducing people to like certain rules and stuff.
Makes sense, yeah.
But I feel like though when you're watching like American football and shit, like
Super Bowl was yesterday, by the way.
If there's like a holding penalty, they're like, all right, let's go back and see that holding penalty. Oh, there it is, right there. That's the hold.
Yeah.
Like,
that's yeah.
Whereas like something will happen, it's just like not releasing. I think I'll say not releasing or whatever, and I'm like,
what
the fuck's not releasing? And then it's just like they play it.
Oh, they don't have time to show replays because the play just.
I mean they do stop it though, like, but. I don't know. I think the not releasing thing is that after you tackle somebody, they mentioned it, you have to let go of them. You can't just like hold somebody down and.
It is a bit wider and has rounded ends. This makes it a lot less aerodynamic, of course, but that doesn't matter because you're not throwing the ball forward in rugby.
Because I hold
in
it
rugby,
down.
The play rarely stops except for a few specific reasons. These include, number one, if scoring has happened. Number two, if the ball is moved forward by an offensive player by any means except for carrying it or kicking it. Number three, if the ball goes into touch. Number four, if there's a penalty. And number five, if there's an injury. Otherwise, play pretty much keeps going. So in this sense, it's a much more kinetic.
Actually, sorry. question for the people.
We are pausing
Yeah,
so much.
yeah. We're not going to be pausing like a whole lot. But no, this is a question because if he said it, I missed it. For the offsides rule, if you pass the ball, like I'm looking up as if like there's somebody right there.
They will be there.
Yeah, if you pass the ball, and it's a lateral, but you're running and the ball moves forward, is that still a lateral pass as long as it's like the ball was released in a backwards motion, but the momentum carries the ball forward? I don't know if that makes sense.
I get it.
Okay.
Let Derek explain. Someone's gonna be named Derek, and that's gonna be fucking wild.
Game than American
No,
football.
there's not. I can't confirm anyone in the comments. I'm just shooting fish in a barrel. But I know there's gonna be a Derek, and they're gonna be like, "Whoa,
Derek, let us know."
Shout out to D-Rock, our
It
boy
restarts
D-Rock.
after being stopped. It is generally restarted via something called a set piece. If you play soccer, you're familiar with set pieces. The main set pieces in rugby union are the line out, which looks like this. It is how play is restarted when the ball goes into touch. And the scrum, which looks like this. It is how play is restarted after certain minor infractions or when the ball becomes unplayable but stays in bounds. The
hope they don't collapse the
intensely
scrum.
physical in rugby union, and there are strict and specific rules governing the scrum. In rugby league, the scrum is the only set piece, so it's how play is restarted anytime it needs to be restarted. But unlike the scrum in rugby union, the rugby league scrum is more of a formation than a physical contest. And the team that is awarded a scrum almost always gets possession of the ball. Compare these rugby league scrums to this rugby union scrum. This is another clue as to which version of rugby you're watching.
What is going on?
On screen right now are some basic
What
rugby
is going
terms
on right
and their
there?
American football equivalents. This is for you to use as a reference.
What are they
Take a
trying to
screenshot if you
do?
want. Beyond all this,
Like, why are they all bunched together?
I don't know, but one thing I don't like about it is I wish they had to like play it in the middle and then
You can slide towards your own
they
team.
they fought it out, but yeah, they just kind of like toss it and then they go around the side and get it.
Oh.
I don't know, unless I'm sure it's not happened that way before, but so far that's what I've seen.
And maybe it's like an onside kick where you can only fuck it up very often, but when they do, it's a sick play.
Yeah,
You mow them over and get it.
there's a guy like next to the guy that throws the ball, and then he's like sometimes making contact and stuff. I don't know if you're supposed to be, because sometimes the ref will be like, "No contact, 22," and then
Just scream it
the
out.
details of the game that you watch will depend on the version of rugby
That was an
that
English
you're
accent,
watching.
you hear
But
that?
before we get to all that, I want to do a quick history
It's
lesson so you can get a
ambiguous.
sense of why rugby and American football are as similar as they are.
A bit of history.
The easiest way to start the history portion of this video is by acknowledging that most forms of football played around the world trace their roots back to the football games played in medieval Europe, and medieval England in particular. These games belong to a wider category of game that has been played
That looks
around
like a
the
mess.
world throughout history, in which two groups of people, and it's usually a large number of people, compete with one another to kick, carry, and or toss a ball or other object into some sort of goal or across some sort of line or into some sort of goal area, almost always through violence. This type of game was already known by the name football in England by the 1300s, and the name football appears to have been in wide use by the 1500s. Today, these medieval games are often called mob football to evoke the chaos and anarchy that define them. And football was often banned by kings and within various jurisdictions due to the destruction and injury that it brought. By the 1800s, this type of game was being played in a more organized way at schools and sporting clubs throughout the English-speaking world, including the United States and Canada. Up until the mid-1800s, each school or club played by its own rules, and these rules could differ greatly. So when schools played against one another, they had to agree on the rules of each individual match. Eventually, standard forms of football developed, and the first one to catch on widely was a version played at the rugby school in England.
Cambridge, England. You think that's named after Cambridge, Massachusetts?
oh, for sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let us know in the
This-
comments if there's any other countries or any other cities in England that are named after cities in America.
Yeah.
Because England's named after New England, right?
Yeah.
We're from New England.
Yeah. So they're New England, and then they were like, you know what? Let's
They're
scale.
just gonna,
Let's
they're
scale
like,
it
let's
back
just
a little
remove
bit.
the new, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like we have some of our buildings are older, so we can't call it New England. Newer England.
Yeah.
So they just called it
just
England.
called it England.
And they're
but-
like, Harvard, dope school. Where's that? Cambridge. Cambridge.
Yeah, gotcha. That's cool. It's cool. It's fine with us.
This is the game that the modern forms of rugby descend from, and it was the version of football that directly inspired what we now call football in America. McGill University in Montreal was the first North American school to base their rules on rugby rules, which had been brought to Canada by British soldiers. Harvard University's football team then learned this version of football during a series of matches between the two schools in 1874. Rugby-style football soon spread to other universities, including Princeton, Yale, Tufts, Columbia, and the
That's
University of
just
Michigan.
like the old school like NFL teams though. When you look at those 20s teams, they get their pants really high. They're like, let's go.
Oh my god, tough squad there. Meanwhile, like all of them, they all have that like they're 1800s people. You know, they're all like rip my throat out.
For like saying it wrong.
Just go eat breakfast
Quickly
after.
became the most popular form of football in the United States.
They're like
In fact,
serious
the
about
first
no
few
shirt, no
decades
shoes,
of
no
American
service.
football,
You can't walk
the terms rugby and football seem to have been used interchangeably. And when we look at the rule books from the time, we see that early American football resembled rugby much more closely than what we would identify as American football today. And even though American football has evolved into its own distinct sport, there are still some vestiges of its roots as what you could call a variation on rugby football. For example, we still call this a touchdown, even though we are long past the point where a player has to actually touch the ball down on the ground to score as they do in rugby. All right, I hope knowing that bit of history helps put everything into context. Let's go on now and talk about the most significant difference between the two codes of rugby.
The biggest difference between rugby union and league.
As you could tell from the general overview, the two codes of rugby share a lot in common, and the majority of their differences are easily explained. And this makes sense because up until 1895, there was only one code of rugby. The split happened because a group of teams in northern England felt that they were being overlooked by the London-based Rugby Football Union, and also because they wanted to get paid. It seems unthinkable today, but the idea of a full-time professional athlete is actually a relatively new thing. And this topic is interesting enough that it probably deserves its own video. So let me know in the comments if you would be interested in that video. Anyway, so in 1895, that group of teams in Northern England created their own governing organization, which eventually became known as the Rugby Football League. And the two codes of rugby began evolving independently of one another. Today, the two codes are different enough from one another that they are generally considered to be two
European
distinct
education, bro?
sports. We covered most of the differences between rugby union and rugby league already, but there's one difference that to me is significant enough that I think it deserves its own section of this video, and that is what happens after a ball carrier has been tackled. This fundamental question has a dramatic effect on the strategy, gameplay, and overall flow of the action in rugby. And ultimately, this question defines the distinct personalities of each game. You'll remember from the general overview that a tackled player in rugby is required to give up the ball, and the tackling defender is required to release the tackle. This applies to both rugby codes. What happens next is unique to each game. Let's get into it, and we'll start with rugby league because rugby league operates much more like American football after a tackle. In rugby league, which again is the one that's more popular in Australia and has the field similar to American football, each team can only maintain possession of the ball for 6 tackles. So this is similar to the 4 downs in American football, but you can think of it as 5 downs because they consider the tackle after a punt or a kickoff to be the 0 tackle. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, in rugby league, after the ball carrier has been tackled, the defense is required to clear out at least 10 meters and allow the offense to play the ball uncontested. This is officially called the play the ball. So you can think of rugby league as having a 10-meter neutral zone after each tackle. The exception to this are
God, dude. Watching the Super Bowl yesterday, some kid was... And let me know in the comments if it's different, but Jay's friend Jeff, I think, was saying he likes to watch Aussie Rules football. And I think he might be referring to this. Unless Aussie Rules football is its own thing.
Yeah, no, it's its own
Aussie Rules football is like a game?
It's Aussie.
Aussie Rules football.
Yeah, or I mean Australian. Yeah, Australian. Yeah, it's its own. I think it's like a. I don't know. There's like multiple. It looks like from the one picture I saw of it, looks like what Quidditch.
Like
it has like a different like. The field has like different poles and stuff.
Oh.
in the back. This is what I'm going off one picture I saw for 3 seconds.
That'd be dope if it was like Quidditch. They still need to make a fire Quidditch game, but I digress.
Defenders called the markers, who are allowed to be near the ball, but they're not allowed to interfere. So I guess they're there to keep the.
By the way, I'm not saying that it's like Quidditch. I'm saying what I just.
He was saying it was exactly like Quidditch. Roast his ass.
It's not Quidditch, you idiot.
That's honest. I don't know. Any defensive player besides the markers
and you're not Italian.
10 meters is considered offside. So they have to get onside before they're allowed to affect the game in any way. In rugby league, there are no first downs. So a rugby league offense has to score before its sixth tackle, or else it gives up possession. This means that if a team is on its sixth tackle and is not close to scoring, the team will usually just punt the ball away like in American football. The difference, of course, is that the punt is a live ball in any form of rugby. So if a member of the offense catches it, they can try to score or at least push the ball as far as possible on their final tackle, as opposed to American football where a team fully gives up possession by punting. If a team does not score and gets tackled a sixth time, they become the defense and have to clear out 10 meters so that their opponents can play the ball uncontested. Real quick, because I know it will come up in the comments, I will say that there are a few ways that a team can get a fresh set of 6 tackles, and those are outside the scope of this video. All right, now we're going to talk about what happens after a tackle in rugby union. In rugby union, the ball is always live, and it's always able to be contested. So in rugby union, there's no concept of uncontested possession or downs. And there's no limit to the number of times an offense can be tackled while they have possession of the ball. If the ball carrier is tackled in rugby union and the defender is able to get to the ball before the offense, it's a turnover, which is pretty good on the defender. Because of this possibility, there's almost always a teammate of the ball carrier ready to receive the ball after a tackle. And the defense often doesn't try to contest this handover.
Yeah,
but it's also common for the
It
defense.
feels like they don't go for it that often.
Yeah.
Like, why not? I would be fucking going for it every time.
Well, one thing I saw that I think after if you get tackled, you like let go of the ball, you can't touch the ball again.
Yeah.
Like there was one player that like ran. He had this sick run. He goes down. He puts the ball because it was like put the ball out or whatever.
Mm.
He like kind of like got off his hands like when he wasn't prepared to, and then he like accidentally touches it again. He's immediately like, oh. He just ran like 40 yards and he's like shit, 40 meters.
So, but like you give the ball up. And then there's usually another guy there, and you obviously want to give it up in that person's direction or whatever. But it's like the person that tackles you can't grab it. It feels like.
I don't think so. No, I think you're
It has
like
to be somebody else.
Yeah, you're like dead in the play. I don't know.
Yeah.
Defense and the offense to both engage over the ball after a tackle, which creates a situation called a ruck. The ruck is a vocabulary term and is an official thing in rugby. Once the referee announces a ruck has formed, there are strict rules governing what is allowed to happen to keep things from becoming a violent free-for-all. For example, players are required to remain on their feet during a ruck, and players can only join the ruck from the back, from their perspective. The most significant rule, maybe, is that players are not allowed to place their hands inside the ruck, which means that players need to use their feet to bring the ball to the back of the ruck, and or players need to physically push the ruck or engage with the bodies of the opposing team so that a player at the back of the ruck or from outside of the ruck can pick up the ball. Rucks are often resolved quickly, but sometimes they get extended, for lack of a better term.
What counts as being outside the ruck? And like how long do they have to form that like caterpillar like human centipede trail where they're like sending it down? Like what constitutes being outside?
But I think it's just you can add like I don't know if there's only a certain amount of players you can add to it, but like I think if you get because sometimes like another person will come in, and I think they do is like kind of create like distance or whatever, and they do it. But I don't think there's like any rule.
Yeah, because it looked like they were going like 3 or 4 people deep at certain points in the video.
I think it's I think it's like a
technicality
tactic, or like a tactic that they use. Like, all right, we'll add like 4 people or whatever. Like, I don't know.
No. Damn. You're the most expert rugby guy I got, bro.
I'm gonna get roasted.
Yeah, you might get dogged.
I'm going to say about the ruck in this video, there is a link in the description if you want more information. So that's the biggest difference between rugby league and rugby union, at least to my eye. And it's what gives each of these sports their own personality. Because the offense is guaranteed the ball after most tackles, the action in rugby league is more predictable and compartmentalized. And it's easy to make sense of it if you're coming at it from the perspective of an American football fan. Rugby union is more kinetic and is more of a perpetual scramble because the ball is essentially always live, even after a tackle.
Recommendations and final comments.
All right, so now that you've got the basics of rugby in your mind, I recommend following this video up by watching a couple matches. If you'd like to start out with a rugby league match, which might be the better place to start just because it's more similar to American football, I highly recommend the 2015 grand final between the Brisbane Broncos and the North Queensland Cowboys of Australia's National Rugby League, which is basically the Australian...
So they get those team names from the NFL?
Rugby Super Bowl. It's available for free on YouTube. If you'd like to follow up with a rugby union match, since that's the more common version worldwide, and is generally what people mean by the term rugby outside of the places where rugby league is specifically popular, I might actually point you towards a recent match, the 2022 Women's Rugby World Cup final between England and New Zealand. Both of the matches that I'm recommending are electric and highly competitive and very fun to watch. So they are fun regardless of how much rugby knowledge you are bringing into it. I promise you that by the end of it, you'll have a much better sense of this game. If you have further questions, feel free to leave comments. If this is anything like my Cricket Explained for Baseball Fans video, there will be rugby fans in the comments who will be happy to answer your questions. Again, the comment sections under my videos have been overwhelmingly positive, and I just ask that you keep it that way. Thanks.
We got you, bro. Don't worry about ours. Talk that shit.
Yeah, one thing I learned was I never understood like why they kicked the extra point from like different points all the time, and like seeing people like run in and they run to the center because you try to get to the center and place the ball down because like where the ball touches the ground is where the extra point gets taken. So if you like that guy like towards the end there, he put it down like right at the corner.
So that guy like corner kick it.
Yeah, it has like a weird angle, but cool.
Take it where you can get it. That's cool. That would have been nice to see in that video. We'll see you on the next one. We're going to be doing more rugby probably today, so we'll have another video close to this one.
Go Scotland.